The Secrets of Stargate is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, Episode 16.
Janet West, Jackson has identified the seventh symbol.
All right, here we go. We are about to try to make a connection.
All we gotta do is bust out of here, commandeer the ship, and fly on home.
Testing, recording.
I know that this could be dangerous, but this is our job, right? It's what we signed on to do.
It was never about going home. It's about getting us to where we're going.
Hi, I'm Jack Barazzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Father Cory. Hi, Father.
Howdy, Jack.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hey, Jack. Great to be joining you for this episode of Space Court.
Yeah.
It's court in space.
It really is.
No, you didn't do that right, though. Courts in space.
Today, we are discussing the 16th episode of the first season of Stargate SG-1, Cor-Ai. The team visits a planet peopled by the peasants from Monty Python's Holy Grail. In a shocking turn of events, it turns out Teal'c did some pretty bad stuff in his former life as the first prime of Apophis. Teal'c was put on trial for killing the father of Hanno. Jack somehow has a hard time believing Teal'c could be guilty. Teal'c, who is guilty, submits to the Cor-Ai. The judicial system of Carthago apparently has no concept of one recusing themselves. The trolley problem is examined in much less entertaining way than it was in The Good Place. Apophis returns, and through a wonderful series of events, Teal'c proves that he is a changed man and is allowed to go free. What are your thoughts on this episode, Father?
That's quite the creative way to describe it. It's one of those episodes that I actually kind of enjoy it because let's be honest, courtroom episodes of any sci-fi drama are rarely good.
Yeah,
I mean they are rarely good, but this one's good, and part of it is because this really isn't a courtroom drama. This is a let's explore Teal'c and his change of heart.
Right.
Episode is what this is. This has not the courtroom drama is just the backdrop that they do that on. So,
what about you, Victor? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, this I didn't really remember this episode until I watched it again, and it is kind of a first season. I wouldn't say filler episode because it does ask some interesting questions in it, but we're kind of left where we started, and I think there's some misfires along the way, but it's an enjoyable episode.
Yeah, I really like all the questions that it raises, because something that I've been wondering since Teal'c joined the team is, so this guy was Apophis's first prime, and Apophis is a pretty bad dude, so therefore he probably had to carry out some pretty heinous orders under Apophis's guidance. And where do we sit with that? It almost makes me feel like the way we kind of brushed under the rug the scientists that we brought over in Project Paperclip after World War II, all the former Nazi scientists who were working in the space program, and you have this weird dichotomy of
when the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner Braun Brown.
Right,
to quote the inimitable Tom Lehrer.
Yes, and I actually live pretty close to Huntsville, Alabama, where Werner von Braun is very much revered, and it's always this weird, like, everyone is aware of his background, but no one wants to talk about it. Like, I have a funny story about that, where one time we had a friend visiting, and so I took him to the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, which is really, really awesome. If you're ever in town, I recommend you visit it. And we're in the big room where they have the Saturn V all laid out, and there's a V2 rocket in the corner, and it's got this big plaque, and it's talking all about the V2. And my friend is standing there, and he's reading it, and it talks about how, in the 1940s, Werner von Braun developed the V2 rocket for the German army, and he's standing there reading it, and he's like, wait a second, German army, 1940s? And I'm like, yep. It does not mention the Nazis anywhere on that plaque. So it's
the rocket that would come down supersonic, so that you'd never hear it coming. It would just level entire blocks before
the only saving grace is by the time it was developed to actually fire, it was right before Germany surrendered anyways, so they really didn't get a lot of them fired.
right. And I don't say any of that to cast aspersions upon Werner von Braun or any of the scientists. We cannot know their hearts, and I know that in the machinations of war, people are often just like a small piece in a much larger whole.
Well,
but it is a moral question that you have to deal with, and I feel like that's kind of Teal'c's character right now, is he was part of this larger whole that was doing evil things, and how do you square that?
And how's that any different than those who worked for the Manhattan Project, other than we were on the winning side of the war? Because there are real moral issues to the use of nuclear weapons and H-bombs and things like that.
Right,
And
exactly.
become Gould, destroyer of worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really, really like that is the angle that this episode takes. Again, we can get into it in more detail, but you run into that 90s sci-fi problem where you got 45 minutes to wrap up the story and you cannot really change the status quo.
And you haven't had any explosions yet, and it's your 37 minutes in. You got to have some explosions. Things have to blow up big.
Right.
And no, to your point, I do like how Hammond basically says, yes, Teal'c is a war criminal. He's guilty of war crimes, And yeah, so how does the team kind of wrestle with
and
that?
I love the line from Hammond of personally I would say that yes, we should go get him, but, and then of course, by our oath and by the laws that we are to follow, this is what we need to do instead.
Right.
And kind of making that distinction of being a military officer, being a priest, being a leader of a company is not about our personal feelings. It's about what are the rules, what are the laws we have to follow.
Right. And I feel like this episode does a good job of like wrestling with those questions in a not straightforward way. Like you totally understand where Jack O'Neill is coming from, in that his one focus is, even if Teal'c is guilty, my job is to protect the people in my company, and I'm going to bring them back. And so you get where he's coming from. You get where Hammond is coming from, because his job is to protect the whole program. And you also get where Hanno, who is the character whose father was killed by Teal'c, and the reason that Teal'c killed his father was that would basically allow the rest of the villagers to escape from Apophis. And so you get into kind of a trolley problem there, where he kills one for the sake. He kills one for the sake of the many, and I don't feel like the principle of double effect really applies there, because he is directly killing the guy, but at the same time, you can understand Teal'c's point of view on that in that moment.
The principle of morality in the eyes of the Goa'uld, that Teal'c's choice was either kill one or be killed. There was no in between. Because darn well Apophis, when he wiped everyone out, Teal'c would have been the first if he wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. They make the decision easier, though, by making Hanno's dad look like Buddy Hackett. Yeah. So it's really no choice at all. You gotta take him out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that the casting was very interesting in this episode. I also feel like the guy who played Hanno, I don't know if y'all got this, but I got a real Jimmy Fallon vibe off of him. Like just the way he was talking, the way he looked is like, is this Jimmy Fallon in a previous life?
Yeah, and I was talking about this a little bit before we were recording here, but I was watching this and I was like, oh yeah, Hanno comes back, doesn't he? And actually, it's the actor who comes back again in SG-1 and then in Atlantis, kind of playing the same sort of role. In he plays Simon in the problematic Christian episode, shall we say, of SG-1 called Demons, and then I think there's one Epiphany in Atlantis where he plays It's an interesting episode, and I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say that Colonel Shepard loses 6 months of his life.
Oops.
Yeah, but it's no, and it is interesting though. The way they set it up. The whole thing is that Hanno's too slow to run into the caves where they all hide when the Stargate's activated, and you just start looking at that. It's like, okay, so they hear the Stargate spin up, they have probably about like 20 seconds to get everybody to the caves to hide. And so what if the Goa'uld comes when everybody's asleep? And or apparently in court, because we see that later on in the episode, that if everybody's in court, they also don't have time to all run for the caves and hide.
Right.
as the Goa'uld come through what they call the Circle of Woes, which just brought to mind, Joey Lawrence, Circle of Woes, which is definitely a current reference that all the kids today are going to get.
Of course.
Nice. Yeah, it just from like a socio-political kind of look at this culture, the fact that their whole rule is we only will run as the slowest person will run is very admirable morally, but it's also cultures that do that don't survive.
Yeah. Even if they do have a incredible tunnel system that they can dig into. I laughed as soon as the SG-1 comes out of the gate the first time and it's abandoned, but not for long. Where's everybody at? And I immediately wrote down, well, maybe everyone hid when they saw the gate light up, and sure enough, that's exactly what they did.
And we're not flying out of the gate anymore. They're just kind of all like they come through the gate standing perfectly still, which is, I guess, better than flying out of the gate.
I still think I seem to recall that there's a point where they kind of hand wave at that with Carter saying something to the extent of, well, we got the dialing sequence better and we got the computer to be more accurate in the chevrons so that we could so that now we were much better connection to the other gate, something like that.
There's no dropped packets there anymore, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this has had an issue that I think a lot of these kind of Planet of Hat sci-fi episodes have, where the culture that it is representing is really only to give one singular problem for the episode, but once you try to expand upon that, it really does not make any sense.
Right.
Yeah, and so Jack can wheel out his kind of ugly American routine. It's like, this isn't justice. This is what justice looks like. The judge has to be impartial. This is weird. Your court is weird. Objection. Yeah. He was kind of intolerable for a little bit of this. But
it is the kind of the small world syndrome that Star Trek has, that Star Wars can have, that Stargate has, where everything is in one spot. The entire world, this, several thousand mile wide world, planet, there's only one spot they worry about. What was going on the rest of this planet that's not next to the Stargate?
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's just this one central problem. And I feel like Teal'c's stance of like, I've done these horrible things and I'm going to give myself up. Like you completely get where he's coming from with that.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think where we've seen that before. The reluctant person who just wants to stand trial for their crimes. I think
there's Dax in DS9 where
that was it.
The previous incarnation of the Dax symbiote, or the previous host of the Dax symbiote, had committed a crime, and of course Jadzia Dax didn't commit the crime, or Jadzia didn't commit the crime, but the Dax symbiote, they argued, did, and it was just because he was having an affair with the wife of the man that was killed, is why he didn't want to push it.
One interesting thing, when Daniel gets there and he hears people using Greek and Latin words, he says, that's weird, 2 root languages in one culture. And I thought, said the writer writing in English,
And I was going to say, like, the fact that he brought up Greek and Latin as being an odd pairing for root languages, does he not understand Latin?
Oh,
yeah.
Because
Latin took a lot from Greek. I mean, a lot. I mean, like, most of Latin's base is from Greek.
Yeah. Like, it was just a very, like, historically blind way to put that. Like, that that's how languages form.
Right. Now, I mean, if we took like whatever the root language of Chinese and the root language of Arabic, then yeah. I mean, assuming of course they're not both the same, I don't know, but just taking 2 examples off the top of my head, then yeah, you could make that argument. That is kind of weird. They're both speaking these like 2 different root words. These don't match,
I think Maltese is like a combination of like Latin and Arabic though. So that's something that happens on Earth.
Yeah. Oh yeah. True.
I guess it's to set up that what we get at the end is kind of a literal deus ex machina as the Goa'uld god comes out of the machine to kind of wrap up the court proceedings.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even the god. It was just the soldiers of the god.
Oh, and Shackle. Yep. Shackle's back. I was like, hey, everybody, Shackle's back. Oh,
he's dead.
No, he's dead. Yeah. So the entire moral question of Teal'c's culpability for his crimes is cut short when Apophis and his Goa'uld come through, or his Jaffa come through the gate, and Teal'c defends the hapless villagers against them, and Hano, having a change of heart, lets Teal'c go, and everyone laughs. There's a freeze frame at the end. It's beautiful.
Oh, and don't forget too. Not just that. Now they're going to swap weapons because the SG teams will come through and help them defend themselves against the Goa'uld.
And Earth gets some of those wicked looking crossbows they had.
Oh yeah,
those still look really cool. I don't know how effective they would be, but they did look really cool. But we have to talk about who the real hero of the episode is. And it's the little kid who defies Hano's orders. His orders were to guard, Teal'c. Instead, he slips Teal'c a knife.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody told him to slip Teal'c a knife. He just gives Teal'c a knife out of nowhere, and Teal'c, goes ballistic on the Jaffa. So hats off to you, weird-looking kid. Hero of the episode in my book.
There you go. Well, I thought you were going to say something like the hero is all of us who have learned about justice.
Yeah. And
I did learn some things. I learned that their culture, before they condemn a man to death, they paint his chest with body paint. And I was just wondering, like, what if the condemned is not like a buff dude with a perfectly shaved chest? Because that could get pretty awkward.
So you seem some fat guy like me.
Or just not like any of us, but it's just like that.
You just got to use more body paint to get through the hair and around the belly.
I guess so.
So what we're saying is we need to never get condemned on this planet.
Yep.
Yeah, never be guilty of war crimes on an alien planet, I think is the lesson we learned there.
I understand. So General Hammond's whole thing is we can't interfere because Teal'c is not an American citizen or even a citizen of Earth, as he says. And so they're not going to deal with that. But I do feel like that Teal'c is a pretty valuable intelligence asset, and you'd want to protect that.
Right.
And I feel like
that's the argument that's made in here. And he does call the president. The president says no. Of course, it brings up that great line. The U.S. is not in the business of interfering in other people's affairs. And of course, Jack immediately, since when, sir?
Yeah.
Jack and Carter do a double take to each other.
Good bit of irony there.
Look directly at the camera and with their eyes widen and
eye roll. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess given the time period this episode was from, they would only interfere in external affairs when the president was getting impeached.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. It's about that time.
Yeah. It was that one. Yeah, and I think that this is just an issue that you get with a lot of these courtroom kind of episodes where they want to bring up these really deep questions about the character's actions, but then at the end of the day, they have got to wrap it up in 45 minutes, and it's got to kind of be a clean ending. You get that with all the Star Trek kind of episodes. They do the same thing.
And that's why I said that this, fits better as a Teal'c story of seeing how, kind of a reminder of how he has changed, but that change was already there. I mean, that it wasn't like SG-1 coming through was the thing that caused him to change. He was already there. He just needed, as he said, many people, on that first episode, many people have said this. I believe you're the first that could actually do something, that could actually do it, and it was like he's always had that question. He's always had that doubt. He's always, there's always been something inside of him that goes, there's just not right here. And now we see how he's living that out now that he's with SG-1.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the biggest question I had lingering in this episode was, what do y'all think of Teal'c's actions there, where he directly murdered one person so that other people could leave? Like I mentioned earlier, I don't feel like that falls within the principle of double effect, but I want to know what y'all's thoughts are.
It depends on when it happened in terms of Teal'c's evolution. I would say it's not until season 5 when Teal'c kind of gets repossessed by Apophis or Anubis, whoever's running around then. But we kind of go through Teal'c's whole progression of how he goes from being kind of like the loyal first prime to coming to doubt Apophis. And so I think, where along that journey is. And certainly, people in, invading armies shouldn't murder civilians, no matter where they are on their kind of personal evolution journey. But it's something that happens.
I mean, obviously, as as Christians, we would say, in just war theory, in the principle of double effect and so on, that none of those options were good options.
Yeah.
Kill one or everybody dies. The good option would be basically try to blast Apophis and get taken out in the process, which means he probably would just do it anyways. But that's where you start talking about, material cooperation, remote cooperation, and immediate cooperation. I mean, it's a very deep moral theology that really would go into a decision like this. I mean, and again, as Christians, we would say it's not worth it. But we have to look too, this Teal'c is not looking at this as a Christian. He's looking at it as a Jaffa who knows that if he doesn't kill one, the rest will die.
Right.
And why not take out the weakest, the one that does, knowing, because he says, during the trial that he knew how this people worked. He knew that this clan would not leave this crippled person. So take out the one that's holding back the clan so the rest have a chance to survive later.
Yeah, I think that they...
But at the end of the day, we are talking about human beings and not Brussels sprouts.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think that this episode did a good job of framing that in a way where you could kind of see all sides.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciated it about that. Like, you get certain episodes like a Measure of a Man from Next Generation is... Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people who kind of hold that up as kind of like one of the best episodes of Star Trek, the one where the debate is Data a human or not, or is he sentient or not? And the answer is no. Like, for story purposes, yes, but in reality, no, he's a really good computer. And so I don't feel like that is as a compelling question as what is Teal'c's culpability in this whole debacle here.
And, to be honest, it's the argument people make for things like physician-assisted suicide, that, is it better for that person and society that person not remain? Right. Is treating their suffering, is the resources that's spent on them after they're no longer quote-unquote productive worth it? Mm. And of course, again, as Christian, we would say, doesn't matter. Yeah, that's a human being made in the image and likeness of God and should be treated as such up to the very last breath and last heartbeat.
Right, exactly.
Of natural causes.
And that's where the difficulty comes in, is that it's easy to say that, like, in a removed situation where we're not directly dealing with those problems, but you can understand why people would have those moral strugglings with those questions in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in light of that, like, what do you think of Hanno's kind of last statement where you're not the same man as the one who murdered my father, that Jaffa is dead? Is there a chance, for that sort of redemption and rebirth? And, obviously he doesn't mean it literally, but
spiritually,
Yeah. I mean, I think that as Christians, we are called to believe that, and as difficult as it may be, I know, like, there's always that question of, like, what do people think about the death penalty and those kind of issues, and how are we called to view those things where you can, no matter what, we always pray and always hope for someone's salvation and their redemption. That doesn't mean we have to trust them or, like, let them go free, but that is something that we should always strive for. And so I think, looking at it from Hanno's point of view, it would be very hard to forgive someone who'd done that kind of thing to you, but you can view it as admirable that he took that road after seeing that Teal'c truly had changed his point of view. And I'm assuming that he would kind of have the understanding of this is the culture that Teal'c was raised in, and so he would know that that's where Teal'c's background was, and that Teal'c had grown as a person and didn't view things in the same moral lens as the Goa'uld anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, something about that just doesn't sit right. That Jaffa invasion just seems a little too convenient, and we're supposed to believe that Teal'c and Shackle are still enemies and maybe haven't been talking this whole time. I don't know. I'm not saying it was a false flag operation. It was.
Fortunately,
it was a false flag.
They only made that argument in the episode, but
yeah.
Yeah, that is a good point that you raised, but I like the progression of the characters in this episode more than I like the actual plot, I guess.
Yeah.
One thing I'm very glad they did not keep was the language of Gould absorption, about how the host is absorbed by the Gould. I'm glad that they dropped that language pretty soon after this episode.
Yeah, I think it's just, like the only episode we hear that, or
yeah, I think so. Then they went back to like possession or, host and parasite language and stuff. It was just,
I do like there's the scene in the actual trial where they talk to Daniel Jackson about his views on Teal'c, because Teal'c was the one who selected Shara for the gold host. And I thought that was an interesting thing to bring up, because I hadn't actually thought about it until they brought it up in this episode. But yeah, like Daniel is working with the guy who is directly responsible for his wife's fate. And how does Daniel feel about that? So I like that they do address that.
Yeah, it would have been, I hadn't thought of that either until they brought it up, and it would have been cool to actually see that played out on screen before now, but
but that would be difficult to do, and I don't think there's a lot of people who could forgive that kind of thing.
No.
So I'm excited to see where they take Teal'c's character. I feel like of all the characters in the show, he's definitely the most morally complex and morally interesting, just because of his background and where he's coming from. So I like that we get that kind of angle.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other thoughts, Father Cory?
So one thing, this is another one of these episodes, and this, of course, becomes a trope with Stargate, is they come through the gate, something suspicious, and of course they have to investigate. Instead of like, we better get back and get some reinforcements. So in this case, it's, the Goa'uld visit this planet frequently. It's like, okay, why aren't we like dialing the gate now?
Yeah.
I mean, like yesterday, like why, Jackson, get over there and start punching buttons, go, oh no, we got to find out what's going on, and of course that immediately leads to trouble.
Right.
And I like the line from Hanno, everyone who has a mind has an opinion, kind of basically saying we all have our biases.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, that's something we need to remember is, everybody's got their way of looking. It doesn't mean the one you're looking at is right.
Right. Yeah. What about you, Victor?
I actually like Daniel Jackson's like defense in court of Teal'c, kind of the, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one there. Wasn't as convinced by Jax, Teal'c was only following orders defense so much. It did strike me though that this, subsistence agriculture culture has an entire huge building just for basically trying court cases where, the verdict is already known and you're just sentencing people basically, hey, you have the gallery, you have the bleachers and stuff.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a really inefficient use of a space for that culture. But maybe they do Cor-Ai, like it's like Friday nights or something. I don't know.
It's actually a timeshare with a Q. When he's not judging Picard, he's renting it out to other cultures.
Well, Apophis uses it too, so he's got his share.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can just zap it over to Farpoint whenever he needs it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we go, we do have some feedback on our episode, The Torment of Tantalus, from Paul Leone on YouTube. He says, another fine episode about another fine episode. I like the mythology here and wish SG Origins hadn't been, well, less than great. As regards Stargate Universe, I watched it in full last fall, and after the first four and a half episodes, blatantly inspired by the new Battlestar Galactica, it really picks up. Season 2 is great, and I wish that it had gotten one more season to finish things. The short-lived sequel comic is also less than great. Can't wait for your thoughts on the rest of Season 1 of Stargate SG-1.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely aligned in the opinions on both Universe and Origins there. I have not checked out the sequel comic, but I'm disappointed to hear that it's less than great, because where they left Universe was kind of disappointing in its own right.
Well, I'm interested when we finally get to Universe, because like I said, I never watched past most of the first season, so
it'll be fun to check that out. I was calculating based on all the episodes we got to do before then, and I think it's going to be like 3.5 years before we get there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, we
It'll
got a
be fun
while.
to see it when we get there. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see with the recent Amazon acquisition of MGM if any new Stargate is announced before we even get to that point, and how we'll handle that. But
Yeah.
it'll be fun to see.
Yeah, we'll probably handle it like the other Secrets of shows do, where we do them live, so to speak, doing the week of.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So it'll be a fun time.
Yep.
All right. Before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Stargate, including Joshua D., Richard R., Daniel M., Daniel B., and Brian R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on the SQPN YouTube channel. To find previous episodes of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. You can email us at stargate@sqpn.com or follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter at SQPN. You can also join the StarQuest fan club mailing list by texting StarQuest to 66866. Send StarQuest to 66866. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of SG-1, Enigma. Until then, Father Cory, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Stargate.
Thanks, Jack.
And Victor Lambs, thank you as well.
Thanks, Jack. And have you ever faced the crying eyes of a child whose father you have just murdered?
Fortunately, no.
Yay!
And once again, I'm Jack Berrezzini. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?